comment on Susan's remark and Diego's too, about the major technological innovation in beer and how it changed from the small-scale production to the industrialized scale production. And I would like to draw your attention to the changes, that similar changes happened actually in the medieval England. The reason why it actually escaped those, I would say, small-scale and household activities and production of ale in small inns is the introduction of hops, this fruit that is added as an additive to beer. Because hopped beer offers so many advantages over unhopped ale, this is another form of beer without hops, and it is brewed by the yeast on the higher temperatures. Beer brewers produced more beer. That allowed for beer brewers to produce more than ale brewers and marketed their products more widely because hops worked as a stabilizer and allowed for beers to be brewed on the lower temperatures and thus more easily transported and stored. And so with this change, it actually allowed for more profits. Beer brewing in England until 1300s was actually, not the beer brewing, the ale brewing was actually in the domain of women. And there is a term called brewster, which is a feminine form of brewer that existed in medieval English until the 1500s. And then those brewsters had to give up their ales as it was taken by the brewers who were brewing these large quantities of hops that were then transported, marketed, and sold in medieval England. And so the explanation is complex, but it involves many of the aspects of the change of who brews beers and this a technological change of introduction of hoppy beer. So I would argue that on one hand, this technological change and maybe the change of the beer producers, mainly being women in many of the parts of the world when it was small scale, then when it becomes a male-dominated trade to this day, it is taken by brewers and males. So that's my comment on the technological change and industrialization.
Thank you, Xenia. So, Oton, please tell us about the exciting life of a brew sommelier and everything you want to share with the group.
Thank you very much. Well, first, in regards for Susan's question, right now, the main producers are Anheuser-Busch, which produces almost 1/5 of the beer consumed in the world. Then you have SABMiller, then you have Heineken, Carlsberg, Tsingtao, and Modelo. No, Modelo it's the fifth. Right now, Modelo, it's not separate because now it's owned by one of the big beer conglomerates in the world. Right now in Mexico, the tendency for craft beer has been growing immensely. The fortunate resolution of the government to stop the monopoly for the Modelo and Cuauhtémoc in regards for restaurants was a huge door that opened for the success of the craft beer industry in Mexico. The growth has been fast. It started in 2011 when we had 0.01% of the market share. And in 2008, we reached 0.16% with a growth of 53.29%. as an annual growth from 2011 to 2018. So that shows what benefits came out of the suspension of this monopoly in consumption centers, where craft brewers were able to sell their beers, were able to position their beers. One interesting thing that we have faced in Mexico is the pricing. The pricing, it's a mess of itself. Right now, you can go to establishment and buy an industrial beer for 29, 30 pesos. And on the same establishment, there's no craft beer under 60 pesos. So the difference is huge and the styles are the same. I'm comparing two lagers. I'm not even comparing a lager with an ale. I'm comparing two industrialized lagers, and the pricing, it's huge. So the problem is that we have grown into this beer culture where beer is cheap, is accessible, and it's sold on every single corner of the country. And right now we want to introduce craft beer, and it's more expensive. So the people don't understand the increase in pricing because the culture of the ingredients and the brewing process has been lost. It's been so industrialized for so long that the standard on which people grade and appreciate beer are based on pricing and availability. It's not even close to the tasting and the components and the flavorings and the pairings, which is a culture that we can see still living in Europe, regards of the big conglomerates being part of, no? So it's been a struggle here in Mexico, and what blows our mind nationally and internationally is the fact that we are the country that exports the most beer in the world, but we are merely the sixth producer right now. So it shocks us when we see that we are the country that exports the most, but doesn't produce the most. That talks about the levels of consumption we have, about the knowledge of the beer that we have, and about some magnificent marketing strategies that have been implemented for commercial beer that has allowed it to position itself abroad in a culture and a practice of consumption that has been intrinsical to Mexico. So one clear example is the lime in the Corona. Corona positioned itself internationally with the lime and blew people's mind about the way to consume it. And in Mexico, we have been consuming micheladas, and the recipes for micheladas, it's topic for another tertulia. But it's been amazing what we've done and what we've created, a whole industry of cocktails around beer. And when we positioned that internationally, the boom was so big that we've become the number one exporter of beer in the world. I would like to finish with a question for Ksenia. Mm-hmm. And from the studies that you made, what grains were used to making beer that right now have gone absolutely forgotten in regards of the purity law that we can find in Germany for elaborating beer, and the customs that have been implemented worldwide in regards of beer production?
Well, the ancient beers were made of, in the old world, from barley, wheat, and rice. So you have this, and of course, corn in South America. Meso and South America. So you have those cereals still used, but for example, the type of wheat that it was used mostly in the old world was type of wheat called emmer, which is a different species of wheat and which is now consumed very rarely. And I don't know of many breweries that would make a beer from this type of wheat. Of course, we have Weizen beer produced in Germany and elsewhere, but the production of this type of wheat is not on a large scale that it's still being produced for making beer. Barley, of course, is prehistoric domesticates, and this two-row barley was found prehistorically, and its beer is produced mostly from barley. And the type of rice beer wine is still produced in China. So in that respect, I would say beers were the continuation of the beers produced from the major staples is still going on. In Africa, many of the beers locally are produced from millet. And I don't know of any millet large-scale production of beer. They are still produced domestically, and the beer is produced by females still because it's a domestic production, and consumed by males and females. So millet is one. There is evidence that actually quinopodium, a type of quinoa, was also used for beer production in Mesoamerica. So I don't know. I doubt that there is any larger scale production of quinoa or millet. For millet, I have to check. But from other main cereals, there is still a large production of beer, I would say. I don't know about these very tough regulations of beer production that dates back even to before the Middle Ages. The beer production was very well regulated since ancient times. So to fully answer, maybe millet and some types of quinoa and those smaller cereals we do not produce, and Asian varieties of wheat, for example, we do not produce beer any longer.
Thank you very much.
So it's been really, really exciting. Unfortunately, we have time constraints to this chat, so I would like to open to everybody, the special guests, if they have any question or comment for our great panelists, please, now is the time to do so.
So I'm Giovanni Medina. I'm a bachelor in administration from UNAM. I actually work for one of these beer giants here in Mexico. I work for Avinbev, and I'm responsible for the procurement, for the sponsorships procurement team for Middle Americas for ABI. And now I want to ask a question to any of you guys of what is the role of the beer in the society nowadays? And do you think that it has changed through the years? I mean, was the role of the beer different in the Roman Empire or in the medieval times to what it is now?
Hello, Giovanni. If I could jump in this one, I think it hasn't. I think it's been a social catalyst since the beginning. It's been a motive of gathering, of festivity, and it's always been this social catalyst of reuniting people, of celebration, of tradition, and with a heavy social connotation around it.
Could I add to that as well? I think Oton's on the right track with that. But of course, that sociability means something different in each different historical context, right? So even just in the sort of short history of Mexico's beer consumption, in its earliest days, it was, and this is something Diego touched on, it was seen as a sort of civilizing force that could decrease vice and alcoholism among traditional consumers, which were seen as largely, at the time, seen as indigenous consumers of pulque, right? So this idea was that by consuming beer, people would become more civilized. And you can see this in the advertising, in that the advertising in the 1920s and 30s is pretty explicit and talks about the ways in which beer will improve the race if people consume beer. And it was seen as a way to decrease alcoholism by many people. There were some disagreements about that. And I think it's not quite the same rhetoric in Mexico anymore. I think people recognize the destructive role that overconsumption of alcohol, including beer, can play in people's lives, and also the healthy role it can play in sociability, right? And so, just to add to your point, it changes in time, over time, and in different contexts. So,
may I follow up the question? So briefly, in regards to the civilizing attributes of beer in 19th century Mexico, in first decades of the 20th century, I have a quote of a writer, Rubén M. Campos. He said that in the glamorous bars, the price was 1 peso, and for this amount, one obtained, served in a fine bohemian glass, a dash of cognac's liquid gold, the topas of Jerez wine, the garnet of Cinzano, the emerald of Piper, the opal of Absintha, or the amber of beer. So we can just tracking this, like beer was a versatile beverage, as it was sold also in Cape bottles, in circuses, in theaters, at the horse tracks, kiosks, eateries, shops, stores, and cinema halls. So it has like a different penetration in terms of other beverages.
Marisa, you have something to say?
Yes, and this is a question for Oton. Oton has recently moved also into working with other alcoholic beverages. He's working with mezcal. And I would like to ask him, how has it been the change? How different is the world of beer for you as a beer sommelier, and all the experiences that you have had as a beer sommelier? How is the population that drinks mezcal different from the one that drinks beer?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because if you're talking about nowadays, recently, the target of people that consume mezcal is very similar to the ones that consume craft beer, which is the high end of society because of the cost of the beverage. But if you go a little bit back, mezcal was the drink of poor people. The production of mezcal, it's dated to when the Spaniards came in and introduced the alambique, for distillation. So mezcal has been in our culture since the Spaniards came along. It hasn't become one of status. The refinement of the process, the different brands getting a part into it has been transforming this trend and taking it out of the little towns in Mexico and introducing it to the big cities. The thing that we are facing right now is that there's only one brand from the top 10 producers of mezcal. Only one brand is independently owned. So all the big conglomerates, alcoholic conglomerates, Diageo, Pernod, etc., have been fighting for a position in mezcal because they are recognizing a white spirit loaded with flavors as much or more than any aged spirits that are known in the world. So, yeah.
So it's the same idea that big conglomerates see the trend growing and want to take advantage of it as soon as possible. So
absolutely.
Thank you for answering my question.
David, you have a question?
Yes. Hey everyone, my name is David. I studied at UNAM in Mexico City, but I got to introduce myself for this tertulia as a semi-professional beer drinker. I have two questions. Let me start with one and then see if it's time. During the coronavirus crisis here in Mexico City, there was a dry law established for a period of time, and Grupo Modelo launched a low-alcohol beer that only had 1.8 degrees, and this allowed this beer to be sold Even there was a dry law, and it was the only beer available around. So would you say that there is a minimal alcohol degree for a beverage to be considered a beer?
There's not an alcoholic minimum established for a beverage to be called beer. It's more in regards of the process and the ingredients that you use that it's called a beer. So the technology right now allows us to make a fermented liquid with 0.0 alcoholic degrees. So, but yeah, the beer is not regulated. Within beer, different styles are regulated by alcoholic volume. So if you want to go big technical, the red ale and the brown ale and the amber ale are mainly distinguished by alcoholic content. But beer per se, as a whole family, it's not regulated by alcoholic content.
The historian in me is fascinated by that question, though, because I've worked in the public health archives in Mexico City, and that was a big conversation taking place in the 1910s and 20s and 30s, was because of the alcohol content of beer, which was lower than distilled beverages. Could it be considered alcoholic? Could it be considered non-alcoholic? Should it be considered intoxicating? And so in like the sort of efforts to try to distinguish beer from pulque, which had sort of roughly similar alcohol content, they would sort of label that sure, beer has alcohol, but it's not intoxicating like pulque is. And so the ways in which alcohol content have been manipulated over time to sort of assert beer's place in Mexican consumption is a fascinating question.
Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, my name is Larry and I'm studying at UNAM. And my question is, like, in general, what is your perspective about what is the future of the industry, like compared to other alcoholic beverages, but like around the world, and also like why not in Mexico? Like, what is your perspective on the future of this beverage? Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in this one again. I think the future of beer, it's absolutely promising. The industry is at a unseen growth in Mexico. The amount of breweries established, the amount of tasting rooms, the amount of progress that we've made in this regard is amazing. And we have benefited a lot from the US transition into craft beer and the way it has penetrated the market and been accepted by locals. We have learned a lot, and we have pretty much taken that as our Bible to start growing this industry. Unfortunately, we are very divided right now in regards of the craft industry. So there are not very focalized efforts into making this something big. It has been more of the consumer accepting it and the restaurants selling it that have allowed us to get this growth and get us out there. But we're still miles away from making this something truly sustainable. And the main thing is the pricing. The amount of goods that have been are imported to Mexico to produce beer, mainly in regards of hops and yeasts, it's amazing. The labs, there are a few labs that are working with yeast, but have not been very successful. The malting industry in Mexico is pretty much non-existent because the big Modelo and Cuauhtémoc malt their own barley. They don't buy malted barley. So there's not a malting industry, which means that we have to import pretty much all the specialty malts that we use for the beer from South America and the United States. So there's still a big, huge opportunity to consolidate the market nationally and get it going, get it growing faster than it has been right now.
I can say something about this question. There's also a trend of homemade beers, and some companies are trying to focus on how to make the beer process more simple, so any person can make their own beer at home. And I know there's some machines and innovations on this. I mean, we are not there yet, but this might also be a big trend, the homemade and make your own beer.
May I follow up this question? Because it's interesting how history in perspective is not a linear process. We started with microbreweries and domestic production of beer, and nowadays we are like I don't know, like in the same cycle. So it's very interesting.
And if I can just say one last thing about this, I'm really sorry. Absolutely, Giovanni, you're absolutely right. The introduction of equipment and ready-to-use materials for people to brew at home, it's been a game changer in the industry. The main problem and the underlying problem about that is that I don't think there's a provider of such equipment that's national. There are not a single malt, barley, hops, yeast producer that supplies those products for the home brewing industry that's Mexican. So we're still relying on heavy import of products, and we are not making efforts to build on the industry that's going to provide the foundation for a local brewing industry to flourish.
I would like to ask everybody to finish this tertulia with a toast, with some positive vibes in these times of pandemic. I don't know who would like to start. Xenia.
Okay, so I will finish up with this Klaus Haller original beer, which is non-alcoholic, because nowadays I drink less and less alcohol. So here is the question. So beer can be non-alcoholic without alcohol. And nowadays it suits my taste in this hot weather, not drinking much alcohol. I would like to toast to the beer and to the production of the domestic beer. Hopefully now it will increase with pandemia. And as the production and homemaking bread increased, I think the home production of beer will increase as well. And it will become again one of the household activities, probably associated again by women, and which will be controlled by women as well.
Salud.
Salud.
Susan?
I don't have a beer, unfortunately, to toast with, so I'll toast you with my coffee. But I'm going to toast Boston UNAM for hosting yet another wonderful conversation that is so critical to crossing boundaries, whether disciplinary boundaries or cultural boundaries or political boundaries, that, again, during these difficult days, creating a shared understanding and a space to come together, I don't think that can be overvalued. And hopefully the next time we come together, we will all be around the same table and can try some of those wonderful artisanal Mexican beers together. So toast to Boston UNAM and to all of you.
Salud, Susan. Gracias.
Cheers. Well, I have, as you may know, toasting was an important oral tradition in popular culture. Even gravings and printings reproduce some of these words and rituals, as the following toast named en una reunión de amigos, at a gathering of friends. I will read it in Spanish because if not, we will lose the rhymes and the verses. Es con el más grande placer que rebosa el corazón, brindo por esta reunión cumpliendo con mi deber, aunque lleno de humildad para alzar aquí mi acento, brindo lleno de contento por la más franca amistad. Y es una cosa indudable que es más sabroso el licor si lo sazona el honor de una reunión tan agradable. Salud.
Salud. Salud. Oton?
I would like to thank first of all UNAM, Boston, for allowing this tertulia to happen, the exchange of the arguments. It was really pleasurable. I really enjoyed it. And I would like to encourage people to try craft beer, to get out of their comfort zone and experience the truly wonderful beers that are produced in Mexico, and put your grain of sand into contributing to the growth of the craft industry. And to that, I would like to cheer with a double IPA from Cervecería Irreverente, which is one of my favorites. So cheers, and again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Salud.
Cheers.
Marisa, do you want to do a toast?
I'd like to toast the fact that beer has historically been not only a social, how did you call it, Oton, social lubricant, but also it was all alcoholic beverages throughout history have been part of rituals, and the ritual meeting of people to share knowledge is something to be celebrated, because there is a bond that is created through the love of knowledge, and I would like to celebrate that, because that's something that Hector and Benjamin do so well, and I'm very proud to have been a part, very happy to have been a part of this wonderful tertulia. So salud to everybody. With beer.
Giovanni, you want to make a toast?
Yes. First, I just want to thank all of you. It has been a great tertulia. I think I just want to say, as part of one of these monsters of the beer industry, I think we also have a very, very important role in the craft beer industry development. So I will try to make my part on it. And cheers to everyone. I don't have a beer myself, but it's great to see that there's no hour for beer.
Salud.
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 David?
Just gonna keep it simple. I want to make a toast for every meeting when there's a beer in the room. Cheers.
Larry?
Yeah, I would like to make a toast to the industry, but also for the consumers of this excellent beverage, and also like for this meeting, also for UNAM Boston. So, cheers.
Cheers. So I would like to toast for all of you. Thank you very much for participating in this so exciting tertulia. And perhaps next time we can do it in person in Boston, in Mexico, or somewhere else with a beer in the hand. Cheers to everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.